Okay, today in episode 5 of the GA and Gym podcast, we have former Cross McGlen player, sports nutritionist, and owner of Know Yourself Nutrition, Conor O'Niell. Conor, good to have you on.
Be here, man. Actually,
Um, so the whole sports nutrition thing, how did you get into that in the first place?
I suppose for me it was obviously being involved in Gaelic myself and playing a bit of football. I wasn't necessarily one of the most skillful players in the team, and thought, well, if I'm going to have to push for a place here, or you know, try and make some moves here, maybe look into other avenues is going to be where I make the progress. And obviously that would have started with just giving my best in training, and pushing myself on there, making sure I was at the front of the pack or whatever it was. And eventually sort of realized that in order to do that, and in order to sustain the progress that I was making, nutrition was going to be a big part of that. And that naturally led to me looking into different articles, podcasts, different things. And there wasn't much from GAA. There wasn't much specific to GAA. So I was looking to areas like rugby, or even bodybuilding, and different areas like this where a lot of the research had been done, and started to really go down that wormhole. And had a real interest in it, and started to try and bring a lot of that stuff back to firstly myself as a GAA player, and then try to pass it on to mates and stuff like that. So that was sort of where I started getting the interest in sports nutrition, and it sort of developed from there into the Know Yourself nutrition and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that seems to be going really good for you at the minute. What are you actually doing then? Are you working with players or teams, or what do you do within Know Yourself Nutrition?
It sort of started out with not necessarily specific GAA stuff in mind. If I had to start out with that, I probably would have called it something like GAAnutrition.com or something like that. It was really more so the Know Yourself part came from basically me looking into different another interest of mine is philosophy, where one of the big things that would have came from the Stoic philosophers was knowing thyself, and knowing, assessing yourself in terms of your weaknesses, strengths, likes, dislikes, and stuff like that, and developing yourself from that. And I sort of just thought that's a good thing to bring into health and fitness as well, is knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And that's where the actual name Know Yourself Nutrition came from. But as it developed, I realized that most of the guys who were following me, by nature of the stuff that I was putting out, because I was mainly directing it towards myself as a GAA player, a lot of the stuff was GAA related. Most of the guys who were following along with it and getting the benefit out of it were GAA players. So I went a little bit more niche in that direction. And most of the guys that I work with now are GAA players. I have previously worked with a few different teams. I was with a couple of county teams over the years. The likes of Offaly, GAA was in for a while. Antrim, I was in for a while as well. And I've done various talks and different things with clubs and a few others. But I just found that a lot of the time, although you're getting a lot of, you're getting top quality players and everything else who you're working with in that capacity, I felt that a lot of the times the very players that were being sent to you for, say, a plan to drop a bit of weight or gain a bit of muscle or whatever, those players weren't coming to me of their own accord. They were being sent by the manager, and that's a recipe for disaster in some sense, because if someone's not coming to you of their own choice,
they're probably not through.
Exactly. So because I was building a bit of a following on social media through putting out blog contents and podcasts and that, I realized that, well, why don't I just aim to help the people who are there, who are wanting that help by virtue of reading the stuff and everything else. And I decided that basically what I want to do is go to the individuals within the team who maybe want to go from sub bench to start 15, or who want to make county next year, or whatever it is, and they know that their nutrition is the missing piece for getting there for them, or one of the missing pieces at least. So most of the guys I work with now are in an individual capacity. I still do the odd talk with different teams and stuff, but most of the time it's guys who are coming through my online nutrition coaching program, and I'm helping them with it basically over the course of initially about 12 weeks, where we get an individual plan in place for them, and weekly check-ins to make sure they're staying on track. make any changes along the way and tracking the progress. So by the end of the 12 weeks, the aim is they've made all this progress with the performance and body composition, if that's their goals. And then by the end of 12 weeks, they're educated to the point that they're now able to go it alone. Basically playing themselves for the rest of the playing career.
And when you find those people that come into 12 weeks, and I'm sure it's the same for most people in general, like what's the common areas where people are going wrong, or where is the issues that people are having, you know, whenever they first come in?
I think the big thing for most people is short-term thinking. So, you know, the first questions you always sort of get, and you'll get these questions as well, is like, you know, what should my pre-match meal be? What should I eat after training? How do I lose X amount of pounds in 3 weeks? And these are all very short-term questions, which, are important. But if you're just focusing on them, you're missing the bigger picture.
Yes.
The shorter term thing is the big problem. Whereas maybe looking at your diet as a whole, your nutrition as a whole, same goes for training and things like that. And even looking at longer term, like if you do have a weight loss goal, maybe extend that out across 3 months as opposed to 3 weeks. And looking at developing these habits over the course of time as well.
Yeah, I think that's a tough thing with people. It's everybody wants it, you know, this week or next week. And I think that's maybe the role of a good coach, and is trying to get people to understand that whether it be weight loss, whether it be getting stronger or bigger, it's a process and it takes a long time. And until you can kind of get that mindset, you're just going to be disappointed, because you'll wake up every day and you'll not see it and you'll not see it, because it just takes so long, like, doesn't it?
Like, if you were, like, a lot of guys think, because they're thinking short term, and they're thinking even, you know, 3 weeks from now I want to be in a certain position. What if you were to think of, right, you know, you're coming on, let's say someone's coming on to a senior team at the age of 18 or 19, and instead of them thinking, I want to get on the team this year, what if they extended that out to, right, 3 years from now I want to be in a strong place? Like, your approach would change completely. You wouldn't be going on any crash diets. You wouldn't be trying to bust yourself and getting injured. You would extend it out a bit more, and you would say, right, I need to look at developing myself within the team. I need to make connections within the team. I need to start talking to the senior boys to make sure I know what I'm doing, and to make sure they have my back in a certain sense as well, and that they know that I'm in it for the long run. And you would change your approach in many areas like that. And the same goes with your nutrition, and even at the lower scale as well. Like, you know, extending the goal out a little bit and getting the habits in place that's going to be sustainable as well. So.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think the big thing you said there was habits. It's building habits, and like, it can be something as simple as just tracking your calories, you know, for the first while. Once you get that, then it's maybe, let's look at the quality of the food, and then you increase it from there. But it's habits that dictate everything, like, isn't it?
Like, you can't, you know, same with even strength and conditioning. It's like, you know, you give someone the perfect program with their 1RM percentages calculated for 6 weeks on end, building up to this max, and it doesn't matter if the person isn't going to go to the gym 3 times or 2 times a week, whatever it is. If they're not going to sustain that habit, all your programming goes out the window. So, you know, it really is about making sure that someone's going to actually do something, as opposed to you putting the perfect plan together and them going, nah, I'm not going to do anything, you know?
Yeah, I think sometimes the perfect plan, whether it be nutrition or training, isn't so much what you're doing now. It's creating a plan that people can stick to. And I think now with so much information out there, you could write yourself up the best plan in the world and the best diet in the world, and it could look amazing. But if you're not able to do it and it's not sustainable, then it's not the perfect plan. And I think, you know, trying to get people to understand that the perfect plan is the one that works for you. Like,
100%, and the research bears it out. I mean, the research on there recently enough, last few years, where they looked at all diets. They looked at, you know, whether it's low carb, low fat, keto, vegan, whatever it is. And the one thing that they said was the main factor of the success at any stage was, it wasn't, you know, low fat, it wasn't low carb, it wasn't this, that, the other. It was adherence. You know, whatever diet, if they stuck to it, they got results, you know.
Yeah. And, you know, when people come into you, what is the simple improvements that you can make that maybe lead to big improvements down the line? You know, if someone's listening, if there's a couple of things they could do, what would you suggest?
I think it's important to look at, I'm sure you've definitely come across it, is the, you know, the nutrition pyramid, have you seen it? So I think it's very important for someone to have that as a good structure to look at. So it's basically a pyramid with the bottom rung being need to be in place before the next, and the very top, that's the least important bit. But you want to have everything else in place first. So at the bottom, you have your calories or energy balance, essentially meaning are you eating the right amount to fuel yourself, as well as moving your body composition in the right direction if needed. Secondly, then, is your macronutrients. So that'll be proteins, fats, carbohydrates. Are they in the right place? Protein to facilitate recovery, carbohydrates to fuel the training you're doing, and fats for a lot of the biological sort of things that go on in the background that are basically can be summarized by health. Essentially, it'd be things like you're making sure your cells are well structured, making sure your hormones are where they should be, and different things like that, as well as keeping the diet enjoyable. On the third rung then is food timing. Food quality. So that'll be making sure that you have your micronutrients, your fiber in place, eating enough fruits and vegetables, essentially, and maybe eating a bit less of the stuff we all know to be maybe less than optimal. Third, or the second from last, is your food timing. That might be, for athletes, that might be a little bit lower on the scale, because they're talking about things like pre-match meals, even post-match recovery, different things like that. At the very top then is supplements. So that tells you where, most people maybe think the first thing they think about when nutrition is maybe going to the supplements, whereas that is really just the last few percentage when you've everything else in place. So bringing that back to your question of what are the small wins you can get in place, for me, I think everyone should go through a period of tracking their food, at least for a short period of time, to get a good idea of where you're currently eating, and even aiming for a specific target. So that'll be your bottom rung of calories, even branching into macronutrients, tracking your food, making sure it's in the right quantities, then starting to build in, making sure the quality's there, then looking at, how many times per day you're eating, pre-match meals, stuff like that, and then on top of that, maybe supplements. So track food. For anyone who's here hasn't tracked food for a while, take 3 to 4 weeks, track everything you eat. At least you'll see where you're at. If you want to then increase it or decrease it, at least you have something to work off.
Yeah, I think that point I get a lot, because I'll have people that come into me and they'll either want to add on a bit of size or they want to get a bit smaller, and you say to them, all right, we need to start eating a bit more if they're thinking we get bigger, and they're like, I'm eating loads. Like, all right, how many calories eating in a day? Oh, I don't know. Or if they're losing weight, it's, I don't really eat anything anyway. You're like, all right, how many calories eating normally? I have no idea.
Yeah,
you need that baseline, don't you?
Just because someone can eat 2 pizzas and Ben and Jerry's and wash it down with a fizzy drink on a Saturday night and put away 5,000 calories, no bother, doesn't mean they're eating loads during the week. That's the typical hard gainer, so-called hard gainer you get is, my family make fun of me how much I eat because on Saturday night they eat a load of stuff like that, but they don't realize that that's the same sort of person who, can skip breakfast, no bother, maybe misses lunch on a Tuesday afternoon and doesn't have a big appetite. So they're missing all these smaller things along the week, when someone who's in the opposite side is actually eating those things without even noticing and eating extra stuff without. So when you get some crystal figures in place, you start to realize, that people maybe aren't as accurate as they think they are with their intakes.
Yeah, I think just for yourself, or if you are that person that's looking to lose weight or gain size, it's interesting to see, because sometimes I'll get people that will tell me that they don't eat that much food, and I'll say, all right, let's track the calories for a week and see where we're at. And they come in, they're like, I couldn't believe how many calories were in this. I couldn't believe how many calories were in that food. And you don't, unless you start to track it, and you don't understand, you have no idea where you're at unless you start to track these things. So I think getting a baseline and then working off that baseline is so important, isn't it?
100%, yeah.
Just in terms of that kind of weight loss and weight gain, is it as simple as like a calorie deficit or eating more calories, or is there more to it than that?
It's kind of funny. It's, over the years, it's gone from, these sort of fad diets where it's been like, fat, go low carb, whatever it was, vegan, paleo, whatever, and people thinking that this is what's leading to weight loss. And then it's got, through science and everything else, we've discovered that basically when it comes down to it, energy balance is the number one key factor, that if you don't get in place, you're not going anywhere. But I think it's maybe swung too far in that direction where it's maybe become like it's an easy thing to say. Anyone who's unqualified in any way can just say, oh, all you need is calorie deficit. It's like, what do I do with that? Like, right, so do I just starve myself, or do I just not eat anything? And this idea of a calorie deficit has become like a phrase that it's easy to say, and actually a lot of people don't even know what it necessarily means. But at the end of the day, you do have to be in an energy deficit in order to that energy needs to come. You need to be eating less than you're consuming, or eating less than you are putting out, so that energy can come from essentially your body fat to be burned off as energy. But it's not as simple as that. There are those other 4 areas. There are, is your macronutrient distribution in place? Because if you're not eating enough protein, the weight you are losing is likely to be more from fat than it is from, or more to be from muscle than it is from fat. Versus someone who has the protein in place, there's that side of things as well. And even for some people, it's carbohydrates. Not that if you are in an energy deficit, you're still going to lose body fat, but for a lot of people who are extremely overweight, eating a lot of carbohydrates isn't feeling in general, leading to lack of adherence and leading to them not losing weight long term. And I think you do have the other side of the argument that says, like, it's all down to your insulin and it's all down to, controlling your carbs. But at the end of the day, that's a nice thing to have in place. But if you are still in that energy surplus, regardless of how good your insulin control is, you're not going to lose weight. You're still going to put on body fat.
Yeah, as interesting we brought up that point about insulin, because I just read that book, Obesity Code. I'm not sure if you read it, but it's all about how insulin is the key role in weight loss and obesity. But I was curious to chat to nutritionists about it, because it's very much advocating go lower on carbs. You should be eating more fats and higher proteins. And when you do read a book like that, and I think it's important to maybe get that point across to people listening, you could read things online and you can watch things, and it can very easily change your thoughts. I was reading that thinking that makes a lot of sense, but maybe those things don't.
There's always a snippet of truth within those sort of things, and that book is sort of goes against conventional wisdom, and maybe too far in my opinion. I haven't read the book, but I know the guy who wrote it, and I've read articles of his, and technically at the cellular level, when inside your body, which you'll never see, insulin does control in some ways the fat going in and out of the cell. The problem is when you take that and extend it to the bigger picture of your overall intake, it doesn't quite work out in that way. Your body fat is constantly coming in and out. It's like flux, you call it. So it's constantly releasing some, burning some, storing some, and it's going on like that throughout the day. But the main factor comes down to is how much is stored versus how much is used, essentially. So you could be, you talk about, this is kind of on a bit of a tangent, but we talk about like high fat diets resulting in greater fat burning. But the point is you're still consuming more fat. So although you're burning more, you're consuming more. And if you're still in your energy surplus, that evens out to be still again in body fat.
I think it's just careful. You have to be careful when you read things and you watch things, but I think it does come down to that simple fact. Like, I think if you're listening to this hoping that there's going to be a secret way to lose weight, you've probably heard it before. Track your calories. If you're looking to lose weight, be in that calorie deficit. Looking to gain weight, be in that calorie surplus, and try and eat good foods.
The good news is, if you do start that tracking process and you decide it's too much hassle, you don't want to do it, you can be in a calorie deficit without tracking your calories. You can just be, if you're just putting in better habits of, say, eating more fruit and veg, cutting out some of the higher calorie snacks, you're probably going to eat less overall anyway, and end up in that calorie deficit and end up losing body fat. So you don't have to be counting calories to be in a calorie deficit. So
yeah,
it's worth keeping that in mind too.
Yeah, definitely. Getting on to now, performance, eating for performance. I think, like I was with Mark and Q the other day, and we were doing the podcast, and we were chatting a lot about recovery and how recovery is becoming such a big part of GAA. And now, as well as that, it's nutrition. I think those are the three pillars nearly. Nutrition's become massive now for GAA. I get tons of questions. I'm sure you do about it.
100%. It's it's one of them things I sometimes put up when I'm giving talks to clubs. I'll put up like an infographic sort of showing the development of the sport. So back in the day, when we would have first started playing Gaelic, you would just turned up for a match on a Sunday. Might have had a few pints the night before. Probably a few boys had a smoke before the game. Like, it wasn't taken seriously. It was you and lads from down the street who are lads from the neighbouring town, just battling it out on a Sunday afternoon, bit of crack. And I suppose the competitive nature of it meant that boys wanted to get better and wanted to say, right, well, maybe if we trained once or twice a week, we could beat the lads from down the road, and we'd have the celebrating. And that developed, and then probably that became the norm. Then everyone trained 2 or 3 nights a week, whatever it was. And then probably around the early 2000s, maybe in the late 90s, strength conditioning became a thing. Everyone was starting to get into strength. Not everyone, actually. There was a few teams who were starting to get into their strength and conditioning. You look at, like, maybe I'm a bit biased, but the Armagh team that won the All-Ireland in 2000, all big, massive guys. We're all sort of getting into the strength and conditioning at that time too. And I think the guys who got into it early were seeing the improvements before everyone else, and were getting that edge up. And probably now, like, you struggle to find a county that didn't have a strength and conditioning set up in place, let alone actually most of the high level clubs and even some of the low level clubs have strength and conditioning in some capacity in place. So I think the next development of that then is the nutrition side of things, where you see a lot of the top counties bringing in nutritionists to work with them, on an ongoing basis. Even clubs getting the likes of myself in to do talks. That's the next development. So what I think is the guys who are really going to nail down the nutrition are going to be that level above everyone else. Everyone talks about the Dublin team who are like, jacked and lean and, able to go for as long as you want them to go. Those are the guys who, like, strength and conditioning is standard there, has been for years, but their nutrition is starting to get really dialed in now as well. So, that's the development, and that's probably where I see it going. Like,
I think as well, it's that training nutrition thing. It can provide you, like, it's not going to turn you into Jeremy Conley overnight, but it will give you that marginal gain. And people will say to me, like, I'm playing really well and I'll eat such and such before game, or I don't do any training. You're like, that's fair enough, but imagine what you could be like if you had your nutritional point. Imagine what you could be like if you had your strength and conditioning going. So I think if you're not looking at those percentage gains, you're limiting yourself regardless of how good you are or think you are.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
And is a lot of that nutrition for performance, do you see it just in that pre-game period, or does it go a lot further than that?
I suppose the difference, the difference between your average person and an athlete in terms of their nutrition is mostly around the fueling aspect and maybe the recovery aspect as well, where your average person is maybe trying to lose a bit of fat, build a bit of muscle. Whether they're recovered fully for the next session, yes, you obviously want to be, but if they're not, it doesn't mean they're off. It doesn't mean they have a bad session and they're off the team, or it doesn't mean they play poorly in a match. It just means they're a little bit more tired in that next session. So the around the match probably nutrition is going to be the main aspect that's different. But I think it's still important to go back to that basic element of your general diet, because that is what's going to determine in large part what your body composition's like, what your health's like overall, how you are adapting from those training sessions. So if you're going through 6 months of training, let's say throughout a season, whatever, it could be longer or shorter, they are you're looking to maximize adaptation from each session there. So regardless of match fueling or anything else, your general nutrition is going to determine that. So that's worth having in place first. But if you're talking about the specifics of maybe fueling up for a match, again, most people would go to what should my pre-match meal be, and although it's important, I would extend that out a little bit more. I would be looking towards maybe the 36 to 48 hours leading up to game day, and increasing specifically your carbohydrate intake in the lead up to that match. With the guys I work with, I generally do that at 36 hour, I usually say. So that means that if you have an evening match, it's generally maybe a high carb meal the night before and carbing up during the day of the match.
Yes.
If it's a morning or afternoon match, you're still talking about 36 hours, brings you back to the morning before, carb loading the whole day before the match, and maybe having relatively high carbs in the morning of the match as well.
So say for me now, I have we have our championship game Saturday at 2:00. Mm-hmm. What would you say would be the best thing for me to do now between now and Saturday in terms of like carb loading, eating meals, timings? What would be the best suggestion?
So part of it depends on what your current body composition goals are. So if I'm a lot of probably about 80-90% of the guys I'm working with are trying to get lean whilst also fueling themselves, as opposed to gaining muscle and fueling themselves. So they are going to be restricting their overall calorie intake for, let's say, a large part of the week. So their carbohydrate stores are going to be automatically lower than someone who has been at a regular carb level throughout the week. I would guess probably you're eating at a regular maintenance sort of level. Would that be right?
Yeah.
So for you, you're probably looking somewhere between 6 to 8 grams per kilogram of body weight of carbohydrates. So let's say it's you maybe 90.
Yeah, 90.
90, right? Good guess. 90 kilos times 6 to 8, which would be, let's see what maths like, 540 to 8 times 9. 720 grams.
I was never working that out there.
I did engineering at uni before I went to nutrition, so I'm a bit of math brain. But anyway, somewhere in that realm, and that's quite a large range to be talking about there. But if you are someone who maybe hasn't done this before, maybe start off that lower intake, because you do find it's actually quite hard to get in those higher intakes. But experiment between those as well, and maybe do that for most people. Maybe do that in leading up to a friendly match, or even leading up to a weekend training
or something.
So I would do that on the Friday, and then specifically then on the Saturday morning, you're talking about probably at 2:00. You're maybe having breakfast and maybe one small meal before that. Depending on how early you get up, you do want some carbohydrates within those meals as well. So, but don't be overdoing it there. I would say just get in a good, relatively high carb meal that obviously also includes, your protein, maybe a little bit of healthy fats, and a little bit of veg. So now we're getting it. So that's the carb load, sort of what we're talking about there. And just to clear it up in case people think you're only eating carbs in those. You're also obviously eating your protein sources along with that. You're eating regular meals. It's just that your carbohydrates are increased for that day. So just to clear that up. But if you're getting into then pre-match meal, there are a few things you want to start to look at in terms of the composition of that meal as well as the timing of that meal. Now, the timing's going to be pretty much down to someone's preference. Some people like to eat about 4 hours out from a match. Others like to eat 2 hours out from a match. Some of the guys who like to eat earlier also like to include a snack in between, full but not overly full. So for timing, it is going to be a little bit about experimenting, but probably for most people, somewhere within that 2 to 3 to 4 hours, having their last main meal is going to be a good idea.
Yeah, no, I think it was funny you say that, because I would always like a meal maybe about 3 or 4 hours out from a game, so I don't like to feel too full and playing. Conor comes in and he was saying he likes a meal maybe an hour or 2 hours out, and I think that just comes through experience of trialing them things out, doesn't it?
100%. But there are some overarching principles that most people will want to adhere to. in the composition of that meal. So you want to have a protein source, just as you will with most of your meals, because it does, keep that recovery process going. If there are some, so we eat protein because you want the amino acids from that protein, which is the broken down form of the protein essentially. And if we have some of those amino acids floating through the bloodstream during the match, it means that we're less likely to use muscle protein as a source of fuel during that match or training session. So you do want some protein in your pre-match meal, and you want it to be obviously carbs, plenty of carbs in there as well, because that has been shown to improve performance going into athletic games and training, whatever. And something that a lot of guys don't notice is keeping fats and fiber relatively low in that pre-match meal is usually a good idea, because these fats and fibers take longer to process in the digestive system. So if you are, don't be eating big massive salads or big loads of broccoli and different things like that, it will fill up the stomach a lot, but it'll take a long time for it to be processed, and those carbs and protein might take longer to get into your bloodstream, and it might feel uncomfortable in the match as well if your stomach's really full. So that's the bare bones of the meal. As I say, if you are eating that a little bit further out, getting maybe a carb snack in there, something like rice cakes or pieces of fruit or something like that as well.
Yeah, I think you have some really good like wee infographics on your Instagram page, don't you, with details more about that. So if you didn't have a pen and paper and you weren't noting that there, go back and check Conor's Instagram, because he's got a ton of the kind of information on carb loading, which is really useful. But I think that's the important thing. And something you said there was something maybe I'm picking up a wee bit more about now is the day before the game, getting the carbs in. Sometimes you really focus on the day of, but the day before is maybe just as important, especially if you got the morning game. Like,
yeah, 100%. I think people think that, and it comes into eating late at night as well. People think that if they're eating all this food and they're not using it straight away, that it's going to accumulate as body fat. But carbohydrates are naturally stored as glycogen within the muscles before they're stored as any fat. It's actually quite unlikely that carbohydrates will be stored as body fat. Usually, if you're in energy surplus, those carbohydrates will be preferentially used as fuel, and your body fat or the fat that you're eating will be most likely stored as fat if you're in that energy surplus. However, for a short period of, say, a day, if you're bumping up the carbohydrates, all that's going to do is fill up your muscle stores with glycogen, leaving you perfectly ready to be fueled for the match next day.
Yeah. Is there something to be said for a pizza the night before a game then?
Well, it depends on the sort of pizza, I suppose. We do want to be keeping fats relatively low. So if you're eating a big, massive 4-cheese pizza with pepperoni and everything else on it, you're really bumping up your fat content, which isn't necessarily advised within a carb loading approach. I usually tell guys, like, you may think that by me giving you a carb loading approach, this is going to be great and can eat whatever I want. But once you're tracking that as diligently as you will be the other day, you realize it's actually quite hard to eat enough carbs
without the fat and everything soaring up, like.
Yeah, so pizza might not be fitting in there now, unless maybe you can make your own pizza, nice base with some tomato puree, a little bit of cheese, low fat cheese even, some chicken on top, perfectly good.
Yeah. One of the areas that I know I probably don't do as well as I should, and probably other players, is the post game window. Like for me, I'll always go and it'll be maybe a cheat meal, or I'll go and grab something sweet after a game. Is that the best idea, or should it be just as structured as your pre-game meal?
Yeah, well, I suppose it's, yourself with celebrations and different things like that. Sometimes if you were to get the absolute perfect meal in place, it might take you away from, going out for a takeaway with the lads, or going for a few drinks or whatever else. And maybe that long term, maybe that wouldn't be as good, because you're not being as part of the team. You're not actually getting to celebrate your win. And, it's not as motivating. But so there is that element of it. But if it comes, if the perfect answer exists, if, for example, you're going home and you're going to cook yourself a meal, excuse me, having a protein source in there is going to be very important. Having some carbs in to replenish what you've just used is going to be important, and the rehydration side of things as well. Get plenty of water in, sipping away at it. And something that actually a lot of guys don't realize is salt intake as well. You are using a lot of electrolytes within your training usually and matches if you are sweating a lot, especially. So getting plenty of salt in there as well is going to be important.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just trying to find that balance with it, isn't it? That, you know, you're amateur too to an extent, so it's like you go out and enjoy yourself after a game if you want to, but try and find that balance between make sure you're eating something and not completely take the hand out of it. Like,
exactly, yeah. And it may be, you know, that may be the best time if you are going to have something that's a little bit, you know, off the usual perfect nutrition approach. That probably is the time to get it in, because you know, the next session maybe is going to be easing back in. It'll not be the toughest session. You know, the next training session after that, you might, if it's on a Saturday and you're not training to Tuesday, it leaves you a bit more recovery time. Plus you've just really, if you've had a good tough game, you've ran yourself into the ground, you know, the likelihood is that any food that is going to be consumed there is going to be less of an effect on you.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Maybe
the other area, and it's an area now that is commonly asked about. I get asked about it every Sunday. I know in your Q&As you get asked about a lot, is supplementation. Is there any supplements that, you know, you would use in the pre-game window? Is there any supplements that you say Gaelic players definitely need, or is there anything like that?
Well, I think it's important to go back to that pyramid idea again and remember that supplements are the last rung on that. So with that in context, there are a few supplements that can help. Excuse me, a bit coughing, a bit of a cough here.
You're right.
But there are a few that can help. Caffeine, firstly, which most people will be taking maybe on a daily basis in the form of coffee or tea, in order to get the best out of the performance. You might need to bump that up a little bit, and you might want to go with something like a gum, or even some people like excuse me I'm not sure if you can cut that out, but
we'll sort it.
Caffeine can be a good performance enhancer pre-game. In general, creatine monohydrate is quite a good supplement for activities that last under, you know, between 0 and 10 seconds. So you're talking about the likes of repeated sprints, you're talking about your weight training, things like jumping, stuff like that. If you're taking creatine over the long term, it can have those effects. So it's not necessarily a pre-training or pre-game supplement to take, because the effects take a few weeks to set in as the creatine builds up in your body. But it's good to have that in there on a regular basis. Then there are a few other things that you can look into that are maybe a bit probably on the advanced side. Things like, you know, beetroot juices. A good protocol of using the beetroot juice can have an effect on your ability to, endure longer. So go for longer without having to stop. And there are a few other things like citrulline malate, which it's kind of, the science is a little bit iffy on it, on whether it actually has a big effect or not, but it is something that a lot of people find useful in increasing the blood flow to the muscles, which can help get away the acidosis, or, you know, what people usually call lactic acid buildup, which is actually a buildup of hydrogen ions, but that's a story for a different day. But if you can increase the blood flow to muscles, that can help as well. So probably caffeine and creatine in general, whey protein if people struggle to get their protein needs met. And outside of that, you're maybe looking at a few health supplements like fish oils, vitamin D, multivitamin maybe. But outside of that, you know, you're looking at advanced stuff. Outside of that, you're looking at a lot of stuff that is not worth going near.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You keep bringing it back to that point about the pyramid, and I think that's so important, because people will look to supplements, whether it be for pre-game, whether it be for recovery, and yeah, they will probably help, but it's that maybe 1% help, but if you haven't got the other 99% with your diet, with your sleep, with your hydration, doesn't matter how much creatine or how much caffeine, that's the icing on the cake, basically, the supplements, like, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Another thing now you sort of get a lot is, you chatted about earlier, that there is a lot of different diet trends, and I put up the Instagram Q&A yesterday, and a lot of the ones were, doing plain Gaelic and having a keto diet, or you're vegan and plain Gaelic. There's lots of different diets now, and some of them will have the merit, some of them won't. How do you kind of sift through all that as nutritionists? Do you get sick of hearing about different ones, or what's your take on all that like?
Enough. It's usually I usually will get questions about that online, but most of the guys that I actually end up working with haven't really gone through any of these diets. They've maybe gone low carb for a while and tried that out and find it didn't work for them. It worked, maybe they lost a bit of weight, but they couldn't fuel themselves. But I don't get a lot of the guys coming to me who have tried these different diets. But for those who maybe ask questions about it, who are probably just curious more than anything, I think someone said if your diet has a name, it's not, it's no good. Like,
yeah,
a diet that has a name, your diet is the food you're eating. Now, whatever way you want to control that is up to you. Some people like to control it by just having a sort of outlook of tracking the calories and macronutrients. Some people like to control it by cutting out fast food. Some people like to control it by cutting out high fat items. Some people, same with carbs. Now, that's no problem usually with fat loss, as long as you are controlling the amount of food you're eating and you're eating enough protein. Whatever goes, you're happy enough. You will probably lose fat. When it comes to performance, there is a bit more of a distinction in terms of, you want to have your calories controlled in a certain way that's fueling you whilst moving you in the direction of your body composition goals. But you also want, obviously, protein, but you also want relatively high carbohydrates, depending on the amount of training you're doing. If any of these diets are leading you down a low carb route, then it's probably not going to work long term in terms of your energy going into training and matches. And probably on another side, if it's forcing you to not eat enough protein, say like a vegan diet for most people, will not have enough protein in it. If you're an athlete, that's probably going to be a problem as well. So I've no real problem with someone doing these specific diets, but at the end of the day, if it is affecting your performance, then you're going to know about it sooner than later.
Yeah, and I think it's trying to figure out, what's the reasons for doing it. If you're just doing it because you watch it in a Netflix documentary and think it sounded good, it's probably not the best reason. Like, I know at the minute, the way I structure my diet is due to kind of my working hours. I'll be working in the morning, I'm working in the evening, so I have a chunk in the middle of the day. What I'll try and do is I'll try and kind of restrict my eating periods. So I will probably eat more between like 12 and maybe 5 or 6, and then I'll not eat either side of that. And you could call it fasting, or you could call it time restricted, whatever, but it works for me. And I think that's the important thing, is no matter which one of these you do, you figure out which works best for you and which kind of fits in with your daily life. Like,
100%. And I suppose the word works is different for different people. What you probably mean by works is you're keeping at the body fat level you want.
Yeah.
You're training, you're recovered. For you have those probably 3 metrics, maybe another one that you feel good or don't feel hungry much. If you can have those things in place, that works for you. So yeah, definitely works for you.
I found as well, since I started doing that, I used to come in from work, maybe say 8:30 or 9 o'clock, maybe after training that time, and I would eat a big dinner because I hadn't ate all day. But I found that my sleep was really affected by it. I don't know if there's any research to maybe back up that a big meal before bed is actually bad for sleep, but since I've kind of eliminated having a big meal before bed, I find that I'm sleeping a wee bit better now. Like,
yeah, some people will find that. Some people will find the opposite. There's one side of it that we should probably be eating in line with daylight hours. We probably shouldn't be eating too late at night, because our bodies, by virtue of the fact that our bodies are naturally shutting down, to go to sleep, maybe the organs and different things like that are also sort of not optimally in a place to digest our food. But there is the other side as well, that, like, you know, say you're training late at night and you know, you don't get home till 10:30, and you have the option of either not eating and going to bed hungry and not having gotten some protein in, some carbs in, or having a meal and getting those things in. You know, you need to find the balance there, and probably I would suggest most people do get something in after a training session, even if it is late at night, and then, you know, do your best to get your sleep on point.
Yeah, definitely. Is there any nutrition myths at the minute that you see floating about that you hear a lot, or have we covered a lot of them already?
Probably. Well, I'm probably from like a biased viewpoint of being within the fitness, not necessarily within the fitness industry, but knowing people within the fitness industry. Yeah. And I probably think that all these things have been dealt with. You know, we're past all that. Everyone knows that all you need to be doing is controlling the amount you're eating, getting enough good food in. But probably we're not probably this by the questions I get and questions you get. We know that there's still people out there who don't know this stuff, so there probably is a lot of nutrition myths going around, but I wouldn't be 100% sure on what exact ones are going around right at the moment. There's always going to be the keto thing floating about. There's always going to be low carb. There's always going to be vegan, whatever it is. All these things are always probably going to exist. But yeah, I think, you know, I don't see any new ones on the block as such.
Yeah, I think most of the questions have been answered. It just takes people maybe doing a wee bit of research or going on like your page and finding out the answers. But you know, sometimes people don't like to do that. Yeah,
it takes everyone a while. Like I'm still learning stuff, you know. And 5 years ago, I didn't know, you know, what energy balance was about or any of these things. So it's not. I'm not looking down on people that saying you don't know. I'm just saying, you know, it's probably the same things floating about that have always floated about, you know.
Yeah. And is there any like common questions you always get asked, you know, whenever you're either working with people or on Instagram?
People love asking about creatine for some reason.
I find that too.
Yeah. You know, it's a great supplement. As far as supplements go, it's probably the one that I'd recommend to most people. But if we haven't, it will show some benefit, but not but if we haven't got, you know, all these other things in place, we're missing the biggest chunk of progress, you know.
Yeah,
that's probably the main thing.
Yeah, I find that too. A lot of the questions of creatine, and I'm glad that you covered it pretty well there to give people an understanding of it and kind of what it's all about. But again, I think it's not magic, and it's not going to, like we said before, it's not going to turn you into that much of a different player, but it could be that 1%.
At a very basic level, just so people know, with creatine, there's basically, like, you know, the 3 energy systems of, you know, you have your anaerobic, aerobic, and then you have the third one that most people don't know about, which is the phosphagen system, or the creatine phosphate or phosphocreatine system, which is, you know, that real short, sharp energy system that's like, you know, getting off the mark for a sprint for 5 or 6 seconds, or jumping as high as you can, whatever that is. And basically what you're doing with putting creatine in as a supplement is you're just adding to the creatine stores that are already in the body, and making sure that they are, you know, optimized so that you can use that energy system when it's needed, you know. So it's basically just the same thing as adding carbohydrates in to fill up the muscles with glycogen, except it's a different energy system.
Yeah. I put up, as I said there, that Q&A on Instagram. Got a lot of different questions, but you know, I think it comes down to, like, I'm reading different ones here in front of me, and a lot of it's the specifics. You know, what I eat for lunch when I've got this here, what I do for this, and a lot of them are specific. So I don't really want to go through them, because I feel like what you said at the start is really important. And I think that's one thing I'd love people to take away from this here is don't focus on the small details. You know, look at the bigger picture with everything, try and get everything else sorted out, rather than just game day watching a pre-match meal, what supplement they take. And I'm sure you probably found that too when you put up Q&As. People are always very interested in the specifics, but the broader picture is the important thing.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, you can get down to the nitty gritty, but most of the times when you're asking a really specific question of what meal should I eat, continued by whatever scenario it is, it's usually just a normal meal, but maybe the quantities are changed. You know, the meals are going to be pretty simple throughout. It's going to be a protein source, carbohydrate source, some maybe fruits and vegetables, and maybe a healthy fat source in it. Like, those are going to make up most meals. It's just, you know, that might change a little bit towards the carbohydrate side for a pre-match meal and maybe a post-match meal. And after that, it's a lot of it's down to preference, fitting in with the overall nutrition strategy.
Yeah, definitely. Just kind of lastly, your own nutrition business. So if people are looking to contact you, find out more information about it, where's the best place for people to go?
We'll have the website, knowyourselfnutrition.com, or the biggest place that I'm putting the stuff that might be helpful is on Instagram. If you just search for Know Yourself Nutrition, those are the two places that you're going to be most likely to go. In terms of if you wanted to bring that a little bit further, I have my coaching program. This is an online nutrition coaching program where we spend 12 weeks getting together, or basically educating you along the way, but starting out with an initial individual plan for you, which adapts along the way through our weekly check-ins, where I also keep you accountable and track your progress. So we have the coaching program there.
And you've worked with some, like I've seen on your website, you worked with Jamie Clark and then Owen McCabe, who was on the podcast a couple of episodes ago.
Yeah, so a few of those guys, like I would have played with Jamie and a few of the other boys, and I've worked with a few of those guys who are at that top level. Now, as I sort of said, generally, the guys who I mostly work with are guys who are actually maybe at lower levels, who are maybe trying to go from sub bench to start, or start with the club to county as well. It's always nice to get, you know, those top level guys on as well, because it's sort of a different ball game there as well. You know, most of the time those guys are in pretty good shape. It's optimizing their performance, the performance element of it for those guys as well. Whereas a lot of guys who are at maybe lower levels, it's a body composition thing along with performance elements. So two different ball games, and it's nice to see both. Definitely.
I think any Gaelic player out there, anyone that's just looking to kind of improve their health, do follow Conor's Instagram page, because he puts out a ton of content and a lot of really easy to see, a lot of complex stuff, but put in a simple way. I'm able to understand that should be evidence enough for most of you, but definitely give it a follow. But yeah, Conor, thanks for coming on. I think we discussed a lot there, a lot of helpful stuff. So really appreciate you taking the time out.
Yeah, hope it helps.
Definitely. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Speak soon.
Yeah.